The Prime Minister's policies are mistaken and he must go. The latest barbs to be thrown at the government here by the next government over there. While the world is bracing itself for the next Trump administration, the personal attacks on Sir Keir Starmer from one of the president-elect's biggest supporters, Elon Musk, are fast becoming a diplomatic problem for London.
Some of the criticisms that Elon Musk has made, I think, are misjudged and certainly misinformed, but we're willing to work with Elon Musk, who I think has got a big role to play with his social media platform.
Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk are just 2 weeks away from taking office in Washington. You'd have thought they had enough on their plate, so we'll try to work out just why they're so concerned with the policies of the Starmer government. Also tonight, unbelievable, the family of the man who brought terror to New Orleans speak of their shock and grief for those he killed. Heavy snow is expected across much of England and Wales this weekend, and the Met Office is warning of power cuts and severe travel disruption. Sporting history has been made by a teenager from Warrington. Luke Littler is the new world darts champion. And
we can get thousands of books on this little thing.
200 years since the invention of Braille, delivering the priceless gift of reading in the digital age.
This is ITV News at 10 with Geraint Vincent.
Good evening. For it to be a proper diplomatic row, the British government would need to answer back. But so far, the official response to Elon Musk's increasingly incendiary online posts has been largely muted. His claims of cover-ups over grooming gangs, his demands for ministers to be ejected, and his calls for a fresh election might be dismissed as the musings of a keyboard warrior if Mr. Musk were not so close to the incoming Washington administration. He is, after all, one of President-elect Trump's closest advisors. So what to make of one of his latest posts, packed with particularly ugly language? Starmer, Musk alleged, was complicit in the rape of Britain. It's all raising diplomatic eyebrows, to say nothing of its impact on the fabled special relationship.
From the moment Keir Starmer entered Downing Street, one man has been gunning for him. The world's richest man. Elon Musk has called the Prime Minister two-tier Keir, accused him of going full Stalin, said Home Office Minister Jess Phillips deserves to be in prison, and then today said the Prime Minister was complicit in the rape of Britain when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. So how does the government respond to this incendiary attack when Musk is such a close ally of the next US President, Donald Trump? For now, quite softly.
Some of the criticisms that Elon Musk has made, I think, are misjudged and certainly misinformed, but we're willing to work with Elon Musk, who I think has got a big role to play with his social media platform to help us and other countries to tackle this serious issue.
The Health Secretary holding back, but inside Downing Street conversations are taking place about whether more is needed to set the record straight. Musk's posts are about the grooming scandals that happened in places like Rotherham, where victims were abused by a number of South Asian perpetrators, with the billionaire calling for a national inquiry. But despite his claims, prosecutions began when Starmer was at the CPS, and there have been several inquiries. So why is this scandal that emerged years ago in Britain at the top of Musk's mind? Imran Ahmed, who runs an organisation that researches social media companies and has himself clashed with the billionaire, thinks the answer is the online platform that Musk owns.
We know that the algorithms on X promote disinformation, hate and conspiracy theories. And in that respect, he's patient zero when it comes to being radicalised by the X algorithm.
One former ambassador thinks it's time to be less diplomatic.
You don't want to get into a public slanging match. But equally, what Musk is doing is spreading disinformation to an enormous audience. And that's very dangerous for our democracy. And it may be personally very dangerous for ministers who are being accused of essentially enabling rapists.
Musk has said only Reform UK can save Britain and is said to be considering a donation to Nigel Farage's party. But he's also praised anti-Islam activist Tommy Robinson, who Farage doesn't like. So how does he negotiate that?
Oh, having him as a supporter is very helpful to our cause. I mean, goodness me. I mean, he's an absolute hero figure, particularly to young people in this country. So, yes, he's very helpful indeed. Now, look, everyone says, well, what about his comments on Tommy Robinson? Look, my position is perfectly clear on that. I never wanted Tommy Robinson to join UKIP. I don't want him to join Reform UK, and he won't be.
Musk's obsession with British politics does not appear to be fading.
And Anushka is in our Westminster studio to talk about all this. Anushka, they must be really worried about this in Downing Street.
Yeah, they are worried. I think the normal government instinct is to try to ignore something like this, to not escalate it, particularly because of our relationship with the US. But they see this as unprecedented. They think that what Musk is posting is very divisive, and they know that it's going out to a huge audience. So they think that many more people will be believing conspiracy theories about the Prime Minister. They're also worried about Jess Phillips. So they are thinking about being a bit tougher. But look, the thing they're really concerned about is not what Elon Musk thinks, but what Donald Trump thinks. And he hasn't commented on this, but he has actually launched an attack on the UK government today as well on another social media website, attacking our energy policy and in particular the decision to shift away from fossil fuels and towards wind power. He actually wrote that he thinks the UK is making a very big mistake. He says, open up the North Sea, get rid of windmills. That's also causing a big headache in Whitehall today.
OK, Anushka, many thanks. And the legal woes, which at one point threatened to derail Donald Trump's latest run for the White House, will come back to haunt him next week. A judge has upheld the president-elect's conviction in his hush money case, setting his sentencing for the 10th of January. That's next Friday, just 10 days before his inauguration. He will avoid, though, the indignity of taking the oath of office from a prison cell. Instead, he's likely to be handed a so-called unconditional discharge. Here, the severe cold snap has only just begun, but already the wintry weather has brought disruption. Tonight, yellow weather warnings cover most of the country. But by this time tomorrow, much of England and Wales will be at the heightened amber level for snow and ice. That means particularly dangerous driving conditions. Police are meanwhile investigating whether icy conditions were partly to blame for a car crash yesterday in which a 7-month-old baby was killed.
In valleys like this, the cold bites hard.
You know, when it snows up here, you get blocked off. It's a no-go situation up here.
Retired miner Richie Humphreys has lived here in Geraint in the Llinvi Valley for 60 of his 80 years. He's lost his winter fuel allowance but is ineligible for pension credit. He says he can't afford to keep the heating on all day and it gets cold very quickly. Do you worry about how cold it's going to get?
I do. I'm extremely worried. I'm extremely worried for myself and my wife. My wife's not in good health at the moment. And I got family, I got young grandchildren. I don't want them coming here because the first thing they say when they come in is cold.
You could step nice and warm there and there's a nice cup there.
Down the road in Maesteg near Bridgend, dedicated warm hubs are urging those worried about the cold to spend the day with them.
It's been below freezing this morning and it's only going to get worse, you know, so it is awful. I wish we were open on the weekends, to be honest, because that it's a worry, you know, people are going to be on their own and cold at home, you know.
The Met Office has warned of treacherous driving conditions over the weekend. Tragically, an icy road is already thought to have caused the death of a 7-month-old baby when a car lost control on the dual carriageway and hit a tree in Lincolnshire. The amber warning for snow and ice comes into force tomorrow evening and covers all of inland Wales, the north of England and the Midlands. Power cuts are likely, with the possibility that some rural communities could become cut off. A cold weather health alert has also been issued for England, meaning there will likely be an increased demand on health services from pensioners and other vulnerable people.
Cold weather brings about a lot of common things that we expect. So colds, flus, fevers, a lot of young children getting unwell, asthma exacerbations, COPD exacerbations. So what happens when it's very cold? A lot of people stay indoors, snuggled up, and they stay warm, and viruses spread a lot more easily.
After a mild winter so far, cold weather planning is finally coming into play, with communities bracing themselves for an Arctic chill. Rhys Williams, News at 10 in the Llinvi Valley.
And there is more on the weather over on our website, including an explanation from ITV meteorologist Chris Page of what causes the dangerous phenomenon of freezing rain. You'll find that at itv.com/news. And the bitter cold expected this weekend will only worsen the risk of serious illness for vulnerable and elderly people. And from health bosses today, concerns over an alarming rise in winter flu. England's hospitals were already grappling with COVID, norovirus and RSV, but over the last month, they've seen a quadrupling in cases of flu, with more than 200 patients now in critical care.
This is how Sophie saw in the new year.
I've been feeling so rotten, I've just been laid up in bed.
And she's not left this hospital room ever since. The mother of two has underlying conditions which have severely weakened her immune system. She arrived with flu that led to a chest infection.
I almost collapsed when I got to the reception because I was so ill. They just took me straight through. Said I was really pale, I was swaying all over, could barely stand up. There was quite a few elderly people I noticed waiting on trolleys, but they got me through to a very quiet part of A&E. Because I'm so immunosuppressed.
The NHS is warning that cases of flu are rising at a very concerning rate. Last week, which includes Christmas Day, more than 5,000 patients were in hospital with the virus in England. On average, there were 4,469 in hospital every day. That's almost 3.5 times higher than the same week last year. 211 people a day were in critical care with flu. Hospitals have put extra beds in place this year to help deal with the pressures of winter viruses, but many are still struggling for space, like the Royal Berkshire.
I've got 8 ambulances queuing outside. I've got 25 patients waiting at the moment to be seen by us, and the wait for us to see patients is only about an hour and a half. But my struggle is getting patients off an ambulance into my department so I can do what I needed to make them better, discharge them or admit them.
This GP is concerned that some patients haven't had the flu jab they've been offered, and that's putting even more pressure on the health service.
I think people have relaxed a little bit on those good hygiene measures like washing your hands, using a tissue when you have a cold. But there's also the vaccine, and I've seen more and more patients this year decline the flu vaccine even though they're being offered it for free. And I think that's certainly a reason why you might see an increase in numbers.
What should patients do if they are struggling with really serious symptoms?
You may need antibiotics for a chest infection, and I would encourage you to please make sure you're drinking plenty of water.
Sophie says she's hoping to be discharged next week so she can finally start her new year with her family. But the NHS is concerned this weekend's bitter weather will result in more patients heading their way. Amy Lewis, News at 10.
And from the throes of the winter crisis affecting the National Health Service to more talk of a national care service that is still likely years away. Pretty much everyone seems to agree that adult social care in Britain is oversubscribed, underfunded and in urgent need of reform. The question remains, though, who's going to pay for it? That one issue has been ignored for too long, said Sir Andrew Dilnot, speaking not today, but back when he completed his report into the subject in 2011. Now, the Health Secretary has commissioned yet another review with its final recommendations not due until 2028.
Decisions on how to properly fund social care have been debated and delayed for decades, a thorny issue that's dogged successive governments. At this Scarborough care home, news of yet another review has not gone down well.
When you heard it would be 3 years until there were just proposals, what was your reaction?
I was flabbergasted, to be honest, as to why it's taken so long to get a report when we already know what needs to be done. It's a bit like the Titanic is having a meeting after it's hit the iceberg to work out how you're going to stop it sinking. Meanwhile, it's sinking.
We'll be able to make a real difference.
On a visit to Cumbria today, the Health and Social Care Secretary defended the timescale for reform.
We've got a plan, not just for the next few years, which this government will deliver on, but a plan for the next 3 decades that all parties can sign up to. That's the level of ambition we have.
Chairing this independent commission on social care is Baroness Louise Casey. She's led other high-profile reviews and will seek support from all political parties. Staffing is a huge problem, with 131,000 vacancies in the sector, while nearly 250,000 people are waiting for a care assessment. And the cost of residential care can run into tens of thousands of pounds a year. Only those with high needs or assets less than 23,000 are eligible for funded help.
The first phase of the Commission will identify the critical problems. The second phase will look at how services are organised and funded in the long term. But those proposals won't come until 2028 at the earliest. And we've been here many times before.
I believe that now is the time to look at how we can create a new social care and support system.
And the first ever proper plan to pay for and provide social care.
You can't fix the NHS without fixing social care.
But there has been no fix.
Got your chocolate.
This government has promised more funding for home care. In Stevenage, Norman is an unpaid carer for wife Ros, who has MS and dementia.
There are so few paid care workers, more and more the load comes. At a time of life when you should be able to take life a bit easier, life is just getting harder. And then the government do all sorts of things to make it more financially difficult for us.
And one thing everyone agrees on is that reform is long overdue. Campaigners want the timescale accelerated.
We've had encouraging words, but that really does need to be followed by action. And I'm worried about the timescale because a commission that doesn't report until relatively close to the next election is an opportunity for further delay. We can't afford that.
With an ageing population, the government's ultimate ambition is a new national care service. But that will need a huge cash injection to become a reality.
Problems in the social care sector have a direct impact throughout the whole of the NHS. Right now in hospitals up and down the country, there are people in beds that don't need to be there. But there's nowhere for them to be discharged to because there isn't the care in the community available. And that has a ripple effect on the flow of patients through hospitals, especially at this time of year with winter pressures. Now, for the last 25 years, there have been political pledges, political promises of reform that have failed to deliver. In fact, since the late 90s, there have been 3 reviews, 5 white papers, more than a dozen committee inquiries, but change has not followed. And some see the CASA review as a delaying tactic. Others say it takes time to build a real consensus on a way forward, both politically and publicly. But 3 years to draw up a plan on what the national care service will look like, well, care providers, councils, they say that is way too long to wait for a system that's already on its knees.
Sarah Corker reporting from York. Now, in the United States, New Orleans is still grieving the victims of Wednesday's terrorist attack, but away from the simple memorials to the dead, the outstanding question of how it could be allowed to happen. Critical gaps have emerged in the city's security, which allowed the US Army veteran Shamsuddin Jabbar to drive into crowds.
These improvised memorials on one of America's most celebrated streets tell the story of heartbreak and shock. How could so many lives have been destroyed in such a heinous act during the very opening hours of the new year? The first funeral has taken place in Louisiana. Kareem Badawi was just 18 years old, a student at the University of Alabama. A young life lost, his father said, for no reason at all. New footage of Shamsuddin Jabbar has been released, showing him around the white truck that he turned into his horrifying weapon of war. The former US soldier was also captured by security cameras as he walked in New Orleans in the hours before the attack. His home in Houston was stormed by investigators on New Year's Day, and the aftermath shows Jabbar's possessions in the house, along with religious books and an open Quran. His brother, who asked for anonymity, spoke of his disbelief at the horror on Bourbon Street.
This is completely out of character for him, these actions. And they're also not any type of representation of what it means to be a Muslim.
That will be little comfort for those who lost loved ones to the radicalized, homegrown terrorist who caused such mayhem.
I just broke down, and honestly, my heart is broken.
For everyone, not just for us, for all of the families.
There are also major unanswered questions for the police in New Orleans. Was their security plan really adequate? How was Jabbar's white truck seen here, so easily able to evade a police roadblock? There are signs the city is now returning to normal, but the famous French Quarter will always now exist in the shadow of the horrors of the early hours of January the 1st. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
Israel has confirmed it is holding the director of one of the last functioning hospitals in northern Gaza following reports of his arrest last week. Just before he was detained, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia was pictured walking towards Israeli tanks. Human rights organisations had raised concerns after he disappeared following a raid on the Kamal Adwan hospital on the 27th of December. The Israeli military struck the hospital, claiming it was being used as a command centre by Hamas militants. To South Korea now, where it's still not clear who's actually in charge. Last month, the president, who had declared martial law, was promptly impeached. But for police to arrest Yoon Suk-yeol over charges he abused his power, they needed to get past presidential security officers. That prompted a 6-hour standoff today, which was ultimately called off without any arrest.
Supporters of South Korea's impeached president gathered from dawn at the official residence in Seoul. Suspended President Yoon Suk-yeol had called on them to come to his aid after an arrest warrant for him was issued. But things descended into chaos. 20 investigators arrived to detain him, but their efforts proved futile. More than 150 police then came to back them up. But all were blocked by the presidential guard in a dramatic 6-hour standoff. It left many wondering who's in charge of the country as the police left. The impeached president's supporters made their feelings clear as scuffles with departing police broke out. We cannot agree with this unjust warrant, this protester said. This would set a precedent. That's why so many are here. President Yoon Suk-yeol is currently under investigation for abusing his power and inciting an insurrection when he tried to impose martial law in early December. This is uncharted territory for South Korea, the first time a sitting president has ever faced arrest.
There seems to be a consensus that South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's attempt at martial law was wrong, and there seems to be consensus that he needs to be held accountable.
The arrest warrant expires on Monday, with more demonstrations planned this weekend. A moment of reckoning for South Korea is fast approaching. Neil Connery, News at 10.
Next, generations of blind and partially sighted people might never have been able to read were it not for a toddler's accident in his father's leather workshop in early 19th century France. That toddler was Louis Braille. He'd been experimenting with the sharp tools when he slipped and ultimately lost his sight. But as a teenager, he went on to develop the tactile system of symbols which bears his name. From books to bank statements, the code is still changing lives 200 years since the system was invented.
The promised Eddie Hemmings story at this point, as it fits in nicely as part of the cricket coverage.
These little dots have huge power. The tactile code quite literally puts reading at the fingertips of millions of blind and partially sighted people. Mike Howell has been using Braille for most of his life. He relishes reading for himself and critiquing the skill of the writer.
I believe there's everything in actually being able to read from the page, to notice the punctuation that authors have used, and you know, to be able to form your view. By God, he's fairly ignorant about punctuation, isn't he? That kind of thing.
Braille has been used across the world in almost every known language. It's enabled visually impaired people to express themselves, from chart-topping musicians to cabinet ministers. But with ever-improving technology, will the need for Braille endure?
Braille is actually part of the technological age because there are many, many devices which can tap into the existing services. So you can actually connect your Braille device, like a Braille display, to a phone or a tablet. So you can actually read what's in front of you on your screen in Braille in real time.
I'm blind and this is my Braille display.
21-year-old TikTok star Seren J agrees. She's amassed more than 700,000 followers while documenting her sight loss. She's a recent adopter of Braille as it helps her study independently.
Called the Auto Braille, it's a world first.
Computer technology has been making Braille easier to produce since the 1980s. And now pocket-sized devices provide even greater convenience.
We can get thousands of books on this little thing.
A delightful prospect for a bibliophile like Mike. It'll only make his reading list much longer. Carrie Davis, News at 10.
The veteran singer-songwriter Neil Young has ended his standoff with the organisers of the Glastonbury Festival as abruptly as it began, with confirmation today that he will play the Pyramid Stage this summer. The last time he headlined the event, back in 2009, this was one of just 5 songs he allowed the BBC to televise. The broadcaster's corporate control, he said this week, had led him to turn down a return visit. But he now says there was an error in the information received and he'll be back at Worthy Farm in June. Finally tonight, when you're 17, a year counts for a lot in terms of wisdom and experience. And for Luke Littler, the young darts sensation, it seems to have made all the difference. 12 months on from the final where he came so close to an historic victory, tonight he went all the way. In the last half an hour, he has been crowned the sport's youngest ever world champion, and all just 18 days before his 18th birthday.
To achieve his destiny. The button has been passed!
In the end, Luke Littler made it look easy. He had just breezed past one of the world's best to become the youngest player ever to take the world title.
I can't believe it. Honestly, I can't believe it. I needed to go off to a quick start tonight and that's what I've done.
For a teenager about to take the biggest test of his life, Luke Littler walked out looking remarkably relaxed. But even wannabe world champions need a good luck hug from their mum.
Come on, Luke!
And she wasn't the only one cheering him on. His fans came dressed to be impressed, desperately hoping that they were about to witness a piece of darts history.
Luke Littler. Luke Littler, definitely. We want to see him get his first world title. We're so privileged to be here.
He's got it. He's got it in the bag, it says. He's taking it home.
I think that Luke Littler is probably going to win, but I would love to see Michael van Gerwen win his 4th world championship.
His Dutch opponent, twice his age and already with 3 world titles to his name, strode to the stage with the confidence of a master about to take on his apprentice.
Well, if you can't take a finish...
But it was so-called Mighty Mike who was about to learn a hard lesson.
That'll do it.
It didn't take the teenager long to settle into his stride, taking the first, second and third sets.
And Littler keeps on racking up sets.
Faltering briefly in the 4th.
No, it doesn't.
Before reminding everyone who was in charge.
Here we go!
The Dutchman wasn't done, fighting back to take 3 sets.
Michael van Gerwen is not done yet.
But in the end, he proved no match for the 17-year-old sensation. After having to settle for 2nd place last year, tonight this remarkably talented teenager kept his cool. For Luke Littler, lifting the world title is surely just the start. Chloe Keedy, ITV News.
Well done, Luke. And that's it for tonight from all the team here. Good night and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Visibility may be low this evening as the cold weather hits. Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
A wintry weekend of weather ahead. We've got cold Arctic air here to stay for the time being, with rain, sleet and snow through the next 24 to 48 hours. Icy, slippy surfaces together with some dense patches of freezing fog. And with these winter hazards, numerous warnings